everyone. All right, thank you for joining the RTC Specification Subcommittee meeting. Chair Jeremy Levitt, staff is ready for you to begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Jeremy Levitt for the record. I'd like to call to order the January 13th, 2021 meeting of the RTC Specification Subcommittee. RTC staff will begin with a roll call of subcommittee members and introduce staff on the line.
Thank you, Chair Levitt. David Gloria, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. I'll be calling your name in alphabetical order. Please confirm your attendance as I read your name. Brandon Bentley.
Here.
Shane Dennett.
Here.
Richard Robinson.
Here.
Mike Hudgens.
Here.
Jim Keane.
Here.
Chair Jeremy Levitt.
Here.
And Abby Mayrena.
Here.
Thank you. Also, please note that we have a few staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Mr. John Penuelas, Senior Director of Engineering, Mr. Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering, Ms. Gina Kendall, Principal Project Engineer, Ms. Julia Yuravich, Senior Project Engineer, Mr. Chris Schwartz, Project Engineer, and Mr. Ken Satowski, Engineering Technician. We also have Mr. Brandon Bartlett with Roth Lighting and Mr. Clint Spencer from Clark County with us on the line to speak on an item. Then that concludes staff. Thank you, Chair Levitt.
All right, thank you. Mr. Damiani, for the first item, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Levitt. Joe Damiani, RTC. Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee, for the first item on the agenda is to conduct your first citizens participation period. As you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the state of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to Directive 006 and for the health and safety of the community, this meeting is being held telephonically. To allow for public participation, the RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtcsnv.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Mr. David Gloria will read public comments received by the RTC.
Thank you. This is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items as included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Chair Levitt. David Gloria again, here for the record. There are no public comments at this time.
All right, thank you. Moving on, Mr. Damiani.
Thank you, Chair Levitt. Item number 2 is to approve the minutes. The minutes are in order and ready for your approval.
Are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee on the minutes? All right. Hearing none, if there are no questions or comments, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Keane with Boulder City. I'll move to approve the minutes.
All right. We have a motion to approve. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next item. Mr. Damiani.
Thank you. Joe Damiani, RTC. Item number 3 is to approve the revisions to Uniform Standard Specification 208, trench excavation and backfill. Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee, the county has submitted a request to revise Section 208.03.21. And this item is to discuss the issue with possible action. Based on the discussion that we're going to have, the RTC staff wasn't clear on what the actual revisions were to be voted on. So we made it as a discussion item with a possible action. So we can have two things can happen out of this item. After discussion, we can discuss we'll discuss the item in detail and authorize staff to prepare the revisions, any proposed revisions that come out of the discussion, and bring them back at the next meeting for approval. Or if everybody is in agreement and during the discussion and we have clear understanding of what the revisions are, we can read the revisions into the record and vote on them. At this time, I would request the county to further describe the requested revisions, and after discussion, I will propose a recommendation.
Thank you, Joe. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
So, when in section 208 for temporary steel plates, there are two methods outlined in the standard specifications. We are finding that method 2 has been unsatisfactory, and we would like at least, we would actually encourage the other agencies to adopt a similar method as the county, and the county would like to limit it only to method 1 for use for steel trench plates.
So if I could, Richard, let me just clarify. So you essentially want to revise the trench methods to remove the requirements of speed and just have method 1 only in the documents.
Yes.
Okay. So that is what is there. So that's what's up for discussion. So if the other agencies could chime in. So basically method 2 in the backup, if you guys see, method 2 is allowed for speeds less than 45 miles per hour, and method 1 is for speeds greater than 45. So from what I understand, we would like method 1, so that there would only be one method on how to plate it, and there would be no speeds listed in the specifications. That's my understanding.
So this is Chair Levitt. My question is just on the what's the background of this? It makes sense, but at the same time, I'm wondering about like very small streets, cul-de-sacs that have very low speeds. It doesn't. Maybe 35 miles, 35 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour is still. There might be issues with method 2, but I don't know the background. If you know any of the background?
So, did Clint join us? Clint Spencer? Okay.
I don't see him on the line. Yeah.
Joe, this is Shane Denner from the city of Henderson, if I could comment.
Yeah, please.
What we see here in Henderson, what we require is just a difference in opinion on the speed limit. We require the 35 mile an hour or higher to be milled in. Anything less than 35 mile an hour, when you get to like a 25 mile an hour roadway, because the speed's so slow and it's usually in a residential neighborhood, that milling in the plates don't seem to be as critical. So that's our thought process, is changing the speed to a 35 mile an hour or higher. If not, we would want a note in there for the valley to know that, the agency restrictions might be stricter in some areas, that we would require the 35 in Henderson.
And that's where, as far as this is Chair Levitt, of course, the standard specifications are for everybody, and if we change the standard specifications, it changes it for everyone. Unlike with the drawings, where we can kind of put who's approved on each one, the specifications are for everybody, And any exceptions to those usually have to be through your conditions to improvement to approval or in your codes or other items. So that's why I'm always a little hesitant to change it on the whole for everyone, unless we can come to agreement on something in the that everyone's okay with and every agency is fine with.
This is Joe Damiani. Can we potentially hear from North Las Vegas, Boulder City, and Mesquite?
Yeah, this is Mike Hudgens, City of North Las Vegas. We are currently following the Blue Book, so requiring it at 45 and above. We agree that we have issues at lower speeds, and so we understand the county's position in bringing this forward to the group. One of the previous comments, kind of related, I believe, from Chair, was in residential areas. I would agree that I'm not too concerned about that within residential areas. So maybe there's a 30 mile an hour and above requirement or something that everyone could be happy with. But that's kind of our stance.
City of Mesquite or
This is Jim with Boulder City, Jim Keene. I'd be okay with lowering the speed limit for requiring the milling into either the 30 or the 35.
This is Brandon with the City of Mesquite. I would echo Boulder City's comments. We could lower the speeds. That would be fine with us.
all right, Richard. Do you know if that's going to be fine, or are we going to need to obey this if we offer up the lowering the speed versus removing it altogether?
Jeremy, this is Richard.
Go ahead, Richard.
That was not discussed with me. I wish I had a better answer, so I have no issue with holding it. I like Damiani's suggestions on how to keep things moving. Just a question, would anyone object to 25 miles per hour or less for method 2? Just because it sounds like really it's the residential streets, the cul-de-sacs and things is where we would be open to permitting it.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim with Boulder City. I'd be okay with that.
This is Mike Hudgens, North Las Vegas. I would as well.
Okay, so that's great discussion, guys. This is how the process, I believe, is supposed to function. So I'm glad that it's working this direction. So what I would recommend, if I may, Mr. Chair, Joe Damiani, RTC, if I would recommend that staff work with the county, provide actual revisions to section 208. 03.21, specifically to address the speeds on both methods 1 and method 2, and that we would bring this back at our next scheduled meeting for approval.
That's the Chair Levitt. That sounds good to me. Do we need to make a vote on that?
Hey, Chair Levitt, this is David Gloria. A no vote is required on that. No action is being taken.
So that's unless anyone has any other further comments to add, that's the direction we'll go forward.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, hearing no further item. Moving on to the next item. Item 4 is to discuss sorry, this is to you, Joe. Mr. Damiani.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 4 is to discuss Uniform Standard Drawing 313, Streetlight Standard General Notes, 314, Streetlight Standard with 2-inch pipe arm, 315, Streetlight Standard with double 2-inch pipe arm, and Uniform Standard Specification Section 623, L.02.01, Streetlight Poles and Arms. Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, the RTC was approached by industry, specifically Brandon Bartlett from Roth Lighting. He has proposed a question on why we do not allow aluminum poles for streetlights. I did not have an answer. Therefore, I don't have any history on why that is the case. So I placed a discussion item on this and the operations subcommittee to understand the issue more clearly. Keep in mind, there will be no vote on this item today, and based on the discussion, we may prepare any proposed revisions and bring them back to the next meeting for approval, or as anybody else, if it is more specifically, like I said, it will be on the operations subcommittee next week. If the traffic engineers are more inclined to actually get something revised and approved, we can do it at that meeting, but we will not vote at this particular meeting at the specifications. It's more of a fact finding to try to understand what is the reason. But I will note, and this is for the process and making sure the minutes are reflected accurately. If we could remember that you guys will have a discussion, and Mr. Bartlett is here to answer any questions. But please remember that the discussion amongst the members should happen back and forth first. And then after the discussion is done, we can call Mr. Bartlett up to answer any specific questions you have. That avoids the going back and forth with specific questions one-on-one, and it makes it very difficult for the minutes. So if we could, let's just please have the discussion amongst the members, and then we would, I'd be more than happy to call up Mr. Bartlett to answer any questions. So with that, I'd open it up to anybody who actually has any information on this particular.
Sure, Levitt, I'll start it off. I do have some information. It is from our traffic operations group, so it's going to go to that group already. But just so everyone has a little understanding, where we're coming from, that the city of Las Vegas highly prefers steel street light poles for the following reasons: structural integrity, with most minor vehicle accidents involving street lights, likelihood of the street light pole needing complete replacement is reduced. These are accidents with trucks rubbing up along the side of the pole, and accidents where the pole doesn't take the brunt of the impact. Small cell sites is the second thing, with so many of our streetlight poles being selected and used for small cell sites and other items that go on the poles, equipment being placed on them, we are more comfortable with sticking with steel poles over aluminum for the added load. And the third thing is that the on-hand inventory for maintenance, with the need to maintain these assets and reduce the amount of items that the city needs to have in stock, our preference is to stay with steel over aluminum. In general, that's our stance on the steel pole. Any others?
Jeremy, this is Shane Dennett with the City of Henderson. I haven't had a chance to spend a lot of time with our traffic department, but a few of our concerns, and maybe they can explain or give answers. Curious about the dimensions of aluminum versus steel, specifically on the base plate for bolt patterns. Similar concerns of stock, the amount of stock that has to be kept on hand. Curious about the replacement costs and the costs associated with, we have a tremendous amount of light poles that are knocked down. And so curious what the cost difference is between the aluminum and the steel, and what the entities would incur having to replace these poles on streetlight knockdowns. I think that's the questions I would have, or the items I'd want to discuss at this point, before I, finish my conversations with our traffic department.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Chairman Levitt, this is Jim Keene with Boulder City. I talked with our electric division who does all our maintenance on our streetlights, and they didn't necessarily have an objection, but they do have some questions, in particular being, do they meet the same standard as the steel pole? So they said if they meet the same standard, they'd be okay with an aluminum pole. So that's about it for us.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? So the Chair Levitt again. Another comment, just not from our group, but just looking at the standards. The standards that we have are all for steel. They're the welding, the bolting, the ASTM standards are all it's all considering or assuming steel is in place. So any aluminum would have to be an entirely new, all new specifications for the if aluminum was used. And then that's my statement. But like, how would we? The question is how we would go about doing that, and how we just like everywhere else in the specs, these are for development and for capital improvements. But as developers put in lights and put in facilities, the cities and county agencies have to maintain what was put in. So consistency is a key, or at least being able to replace what's there. So that's why you don't see a lot of different streetlights in the city or in the county or anywhere else. Downtown, we have some specialty ones, but we use the same kind throughout downtown. So that's a big concern, that if you did something aluminum, that it would match and look and feel and durability and be able to swap it out. That's more questions for the industry, for the industry.
Yeah, Joe Damiani, RTC. Mr. Chair, if I may, the process would be similar to any other process, right? We agree that even in the backup, we put add aluminum dorm spec and add language for aluminum street poles. So we agree that if it is going to be an acceptable alternative, then absolutely, we have to have a full-blown revision to the specifications for people to review, approve, and make sure it's all consistent with everything. And that would be what would be come forward. So with that, if there's no other discussion, if we could, Mr. Bartlett, I don't know if you wrote down some of the questions that were brought up, but if you could please, discuss some of the issues with the aluminum, with the base plate, the cost of replacement, is it the same standard as steel, and some of the other things that pop up. If you could please address those, so they'd have information to bring back to their respective agencies.
Okay, this is Brandon Bartlett with Roth Lighting. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman. To answer some of the questions, we have prepared, kind of the first question that Mr. Chairman asked about writing specs, and we'd have to revise the drawings and whatnot. We've already prepared an actual revision to the drawings, and we've also written a whole section of specs that I've shared with Joe about a month ago. So So we have looked into these questions about the dimensions of the base plate, stock on hand, replacement costs. We can definitely address those with no problem. As you see in this agenda, we've got a letter written from HAPCO themselves, Mr. Danny Michael, and he explains some of the benefits that aluminum has over steel, from aluminum being very corrosion resistant. Aluminum is very shiny, and if there are any dings, trucks, people putting graffiti on the poles, they can easily be sanded down. And the nice thing about aluminum is you can sand them down and it doesn't degrade the quality of the pole like a steel pole. When a steel pole is galvanized and that galvanization is dented off, scraped off, or when you have to sand it for graffiti, then that just degraded the structural integrity of the pole. Aluminum doesn't have that issue. Some other benefits of aluminum is the lightweight. Aluminum poles are about a third of the weight of steel. However, pound for pound, aluminum is stronger than steel. Some of the other things about the breakaway, the aluminum poles are definitely have the capability to be broken away if they are hit right at the base. So there's not any issue with safety as far as them being hit from a vehicle and having breakaway capabilities. The aluminum poles from HAPCO are warranted for life. So the cost, having a pole not last and having the replacement, I think the replacement cost would be a lot less with aluminum because of that lifetime warranty that HAPCO has. So I think that's another good thing about the aluminum from HAPCO is they have their plant is in the U.S. I think the lead times would be a lot less than steel, and so the stock and having stock availability to replace them, I think, would be better than what you're seeing from steel at this time. The stock is easier for the distributors to keep it, to ship it. The material is recyclable, so if the pole gets knocked down, you can recycle it. And the thing about aluminum is they're going to stay shiny and look newer for a lot longer period of time than steel. I've also got on the line, if you'd like to hear any comments from HAPCO, I've got Danny Michael and David Grubb, engineers from HAPCO. If we could allow them to make any comments that I have overlooked, that would be great.
If I may, this is Danny Mitchell, and committee chair and the committee. Thank you for allowing us to take a few minutes of your time and have this discussion with you guys. One other point that I would like to make, or two other points that I would like to make in regards to structural integrity. Our poles designed according to the specifications. We should be able to have the exact same structural integrity that you're seeing with your steel poles. And the reference was made to cell sites and additional loading required on those. When we design our aluminum poles, we design them for those loadings that would be placed on those. So they should be able to accommodate, additional cell radios that may be placed on there as well. So structurally, they should be able to provide the same results that you're seeing in steel. Let me, if I may, also replacement cost. We should be extremely cost competitive. For aluminum, should be extremely cost competitive to what you're seeing with steel. In particular, at this time, steel, if you track that at all, is just going absolutely crazy right now. Supply is not meeting demand in any form or fashion, which would probably lead to delays as far as lead times go and dramatic increases in prices.
So, Mr. Chair, Joe Damiani, RTC, if I may, this is great discussion, and I'll tell you, I'm a firm believer in allowing alternate materials, especially if they can help reduce cost and lead times. So, knowing that we're not going to be able to vote on this, unless anybody has any more questions, I would just recommend that you guys take this information back to your traffic folks who are going to be on the operations subcommittee next week, for the industry, from Roth and HAPCO. You'll be invited again next week to do a similar avenue. But I wanted, because the meetings take place in the way they do, I just wanted to make sure that the specification subcommittee understood what the issues were. I understand it's going to get hashed out more in detail with traffic in ops, because that's the traffic folks, but ultimately it has to come back through this group to actually approve any revisions to the specifications as well. So I wanted them to get the heads up. Unless there's any other questions, we don't need to vote on this. Yes.
Richard Robinson with Clark County Public Works. I think we touched a little bit on some of the specifications were written for steel, and I think one of the responses from one of the manufacturer's representatives said they had already written something. I think we were trying to highlight there's some shortcomings in what was written and what was shown to us. As a simple example, the gauge of aluminum or the thickness of aluminum is probably different than steel. I'm not the structure guy to answer that question, but there probably needs to be further revisions and further looking at it when they take it to traffic.
Absolutely. This is, like I said, I don't even think theirs is going to go for a vote as well. It's probably going to get around and have a full-blown revision proposed. This was just something that I didn't have any information on it or understanding of it, so I just threw together just this basic stuff that basically is saying why aren't, because we specifically say aluminum is not acceptable, right? So that's really what the big question is. If it is going to be acceptable, then yes, we will have a full-blown set of specifications and proposed specs and drawings to accommodate aluminum. So basically the big question is, and that's what I would like you to bring back to your traffic people to be able to address at next week's operations subcommittee. If aluminum is going to be acceptable, then that's really what the big question is for next week. And then we can work on getting the actual set of specifications written and in that fashion. So it'll come back at the next meeting for a literal, revisions specifications. But the main focus right now is that I have no understanding of why we specifically say aluminum and aluminum alloy is not acceptable. Obviously, that there was a reason at some point for that to be on the standard general notes. Item number 2 specifically says that. And so until that gets addressed, we really can't even go forward with a revision. So the main focus is to say, is everybody acceptable to having an alternative? And if they are, then we will have real specifications and drawings drafted up for you guys to review and approve. So that's the basis of it. So I agree with you, Richard. What's written isn't intended to be voted on, which is why we're not voting. But that's the real premise. I am a big proponent of not being sole sourced and specific. To me, if there are alternatives, that just makes things better for everything. You guys and the manufacturers and the contractors and everything. Just I love competition. So therefore, if we can remove where something specifically says it's not acceptable, that would be my, objective, and then get real specifications and drawings. So basically, there really is no vote, but that's what we'll be prepared to talk about next week at Ops. And just for everybody's knowledge, especially you guys on the industry, I don't anticipate a vote at ops as well. I assume we're going to have this similar discussion, and if it becomes in way of aluminum becoming acceptable, then we would do exactly like we're doing with the county's request for that. We will discuss it. We'll work with whoever to get the specifications drafted up, and then we will sit them out for review and approval. And then keep in mind that, just for everybody else's knowledge, the way a drawing or specification revision gets approved, just for your knowledge, it goes through the committees, subcommittees of specifications, and if it's traffic related, it goes through ops. It goes to industry review, and then it goes to any comments from industry review. If they're severe, they require back to the committee. If they're not, they go right to EAC, and then they go to the board. So it takes a while to get something approved either way, but at least this is starting the process and lets us see if this is going to be warranted or not. So if nobody else has anything to add, then I think we would, I'd recommend we push this. We move on to the next item, and we have the similar discussion at operations with the traffic folks.
Mr. Chairman? Oh. This is Jim Keene with Boulder City. Hey, Joe, as far as the aluminum meeting the standard of steel, would we want to have a structural engineer look at it, or are we too soon for that? Would we want to wait until we decide if we even want to allow it and then have a structural engineer look at it?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may, that's exactly right, Jim. If the aluminum becomes acceptable, then the specifications will go through the full-blown review, and we will have structurals take a look at it to make sure that we are doing everything comparable. But it's too soon at this point. I don't want to go through that exercise. If the traffic folks come back and say, nope, we're adamantly against aluminum, and here's the reason why. But, either way. But so it will be addressed if it becomes an alternative.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Any other comments? I think it's the direction we're going, and it doesn't need a comment. It doesn't need a vote, so we can just go to ops. If the aluminum people can address all the concerns and from the questions, I think it's fine to go forward. So go ahead. Any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, Joe Damiani, RTC. Please, all members, if you can at least send an email or have a discussion with your traffic folks so that they know what discussions happened here, so that they're familiar with it for next week, because it's going to be a very similar thing. But I'd like to have a lot more, this particularly, even though you're part of the process, the true answers need to come from the traffic folks. And that's why I want to make sure that they're really briefed on this, and it's not a surprise to them next week when we talk about it, so we can have some real discussions and real decisions about what the traffic departments are okay with and not okay with. So please have those conversations internally, and let us be ready to have some good answers next week, please.
Okay. Unless anyone else has further comments, we'll move on to the next item. I'll give everyone a second in case there's any other comments on that item. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. Go ahead, Mr. Damiani.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 5 is to discuss establishing a working group to review the uniform standard specifications and drawings. So fittingly, Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee, we want to start the process of creating a working group to perform a complete review and provide recommendations on revisions to the uniform standard specifications and the uniform standard drawings. There's no action required on this particular item, but I do want to explain the process. So we would like all the members to recommend an agency representative to the RTC within the next month or so, and we will bring an item at the next meeting to actually establish the working group. And at that meeting, as part of the agenda item, I will have a proposed schedule of meeting days and topics to discuss on those meetings. So I am basically going to go through the entire Blue Book, drawings and revision and specifications, and I'm going to propose at meetings that we're going to talk about this specification and the associated drawings that happen with it. So I want to try to do this as a comprehensive review. If specifications are standalone, then we review the specs, but if specs have drawings associated with it, we would like to have the drawings discussed at the same time we're dealing with the specifications. So that's what I will bring at next meeting. The working group, so you know, will be a publicly noticed meeting. And we will allow comments from the general public, right? So it's going to be, the reason why it was pushed off a little bit is because of that. Our agenda team wanted it to be an actual public meeting. So therefore, the beauty about that is, if you guys, you or any member of ops or anybody else wants to be on, we don't have any quorum issues. It's going to be a public meeting, so you could be the member, or you can have somebody from your organization be the member. Either way, but we're not going to be restricted because it will be a public meeting. And then we're going to go through that. I anticipate the working group will take about a year to go through every specification and every drawing. Just to note that this is long overdue. And on Jim's point with the earlier comment, we're also going to include any specialty engineering review we may need for any specific discipline, no matter what they are, to ensure that we're complying with all the current codes. Right now, we say we have a lot of these things. We at the RTC, we're the keeper of these, and we want to make sure that when we go through this full-blown review, we have all structural analysis, we have all electrical analysis, and any other specialty disciplines that we may need. We want those to be on file, and we will keep those on file going forward. So I think this is long overdue. And that's basically all I have, is to give you the update on it. And I would be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Chair Levitt here. I don't have any questions. I think you answered my concern about whether it be people from this spec committee would be on there. So pretty much anyone from the agency. And we're looking for just one person per agency right now?
You could, that would be ideal. I mean, you could have anybody, you know, and keep in mind too, the whole purpose to have the schedule so that you see what sections we're at is you can have your working group member identified, but you can also bring expertise in whatever sections those are. You know, that's my purpose, is to make sure you guys have the outline of what it is we're going to discuss, so that we all have the expertise there to go through these things and make the revisions necessary, because it is long overdue and these things really need to be addressed. So, yeah, you can have more than one if you want. You can have, you know, you can have anybody. It's going to be a public meeting. We will have industry, right? I'm going to reach out to the home builders, the Contractors Association. We're going to make sure they have a representative, NAIOP. So all the industries we're going to try to have, you know, we'll try to get somebody from ACEC. We're going to put it out to everybody, because we want this working group to be really efficient and be able to have the expertise to talk about these things and make these things really up to date and current.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Penuelos with the RTC, if I may.
You may.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, Joe, thanks for pointing that out. And that's right there is the reason why we wanted to go down the path of a working group, a publicly noticed working group, rather than just trying to do this in the committee, so we could really get and encourage that industry participation. I just wanted to point that out. People might be wondering, well, why not just do it in the committee? It could be done in the committee, but after a lot of discussion, particularly with the agenda team and others, that if we want that industry participation, then the working group, a publicly noticed working group, is really the way to do it. Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Penuelos. Are there any other comments concerning this item? Questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Keene with Boulder City. Joe, I assume you want whoever we're going to have on the committee at the next meeting?
No, actually, we're not going to start. We just need the names and the representatives, and then the item will have the people listed, and that'll be for your committee to approve on establishing the working group. So next meeting, you're just going to actually approve who the people are on the working group.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So I don't anticipate. I'm working with the agenda team on what days are going to be best for them, since it has to be a publicly noticed meeting. So at that next meeting, we will have the list of schedule on where it's at. So, and the reason why, I hope you guys all have, representatives who's going to be on the committee, and then backups and stuff like that, because, it's going to be a daunting task to go through this. I'm anticipating every 2 weeks, and then we'll report to this committee as well, what's going on and where we're at. But I want to do a really good review, but I also don't want it to be sitting and taking, I want to keep it moving forward and have the right people at the meetings to discuss it. So.
Gotcha. Okay, should we send the name of the person to David, or will you just wait until the next meeting?
No, you can, if everybody can, between now, the next meeting is not for 2 months. So within the next month or so, if everybody can send to us who they want on it, you can send it directly to Selma Flores in Streets and Highways Group, or you can send them to me directly, and then we will draft the agenda item and have everybody listed. And then if we don't have people that we know need to be on there, we'll be reaching out. But if you could just get them sent to me or to Selma, we'll make sure it's on the item for next month or for next meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, John Penuelos again, if I may.
Yep.
Thank you. And I just wanted to echo what Joe said there. The people that we need in this committee, or I'm sorry, on this working group, are people that have the authority to make decisions. This is going to be a daunting task. It's not, and it will require decisive action when the time comes. So we understand the need to contemplate, discuss, make sure we're moving in the right direction on things. But the people with the authority to decide need to be in the working group. Of course, there will be a formal approval process in the committee, the spec committee, and ultimately all the revisions will go through the process that Joe outlined, landing on the EAC's agenda for approval, and then obviously the board as well. So, but it's going to be important to have the right people in there that can understand the issue, decide on the issue, and recommend a course of action. That would be my comment, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that.
And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
Joe Damiani, RTC. So the other thing too that's important to understand is that yes, we want the expertise there when we're discussing the specific items. My vision on what I see is that we will discuss items, discuss things, go through, and then at the next meeting we will approve everything that we went through, so that you'll have time to go back and talk to the people about what we need to do. But on the same token, this is going to be a full-blown review and analysis and revisions. So it's going to get adopted one time. So not until we're done with the entire thing are we going to then package it, submit it out for industry, and get all approval and adoptions at one point. So that's the goal, is to try to do it all at one time, rather than so that we would have a brand new set of documents and we're all adopted, and then we can go forward from there. So I think that's important.
So yeah, sure, Levitt. So you're not going to be doing any. It's not going to be piecemeal, like a section at a time being approved at the committee. It's going to be all together.
Right. The working group will work on approving sections and having things ready to go. But once it's all set to go, the full-blown draft is what's going to be sent out. and I assume that's going to take a good 3-month process to just let everybody digest it and review it and look at all that. So that's going to be, whoever's not involved in the whole process is going to have to take a look at it. But in any event, that's the plan, is to go through a full-blown comprehensive review and approval.
Okay, thank you. So, Chair Levitt, again, one more question was, you mentioned so that we can all go back and get the right people for this working group, knowing the time commitment. It's the people involved with the working group is going to be, you're expecting one meeting every 2 weeks. Will be a pretty substantial meeting, I imagine, a couple hours, and then a lot of follow up, and it's going to take a good chunk of their time. That's correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I believe we want the people understanding that it is going to be a serious commitment. That's why multiple is probably not a bad idea, to have as many people as possible that you could have representing your area, so that we know we're always covered and we're in there. But I think everybody can agree that they're long overdue. And I'll just give you one example. My objective out of this whole thing is that when we do a capital improvement plan, a capital improvement project, a CIP project, and the specifications are written for that project, my goal would be to have 0 supplemental specifications, meaning that we should all be looking at how we supplement the specifications today and try to agree upon how these things should be written to accommodate them, so we don't have to supplement for specific projects. There's always going to be an exception, obviously, but for the most part, when we create these standard specifications, they should be able to accommodate our projects in whole. That would be my number one objective. So it is going to be a daunting task, and we're going to have to go through it. So let's be prepared.
Okay, any other? Well, I have one other question. So there was some side discussion once upon a time about having specifications for capital improvements and then something for development. But we're still thinking this is going to be something that is all inclusive for development and capital improvement project.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Joe Damiani, RTC. I have been in discussions with flood control and us at RTC that during this process, we want to try to create specifications that are solely for RTC and flood control funded projects, so that therefore there are as limited supplementals as possible, as well as drawings. There's a lot of drawings in the Blue Book today that really are there to help the agencies comply with development procedures that don't necessarily need to be in capital projects, and we would eliminate those from what ours are. So yes, the objective would be to have, for lack of a better term, a platinum book that is primarily for RTC funded and flood control funded projects that are similar to the state's Silver Book. So that's what we're intending to do. That's behind the scenes, because once we know what the revisions are, then it'll be easier to separate out what it is we need. But that is an ultimate objective.
Okay, I think that's. Thank you, Joe. I think it's important to note, as even to getting people on the working group, that you want people that are involved with capital improvement projects and possibly also land development, because to know what's important for land development, what's important for capital improvement. Are there any other comments on this item?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Keene with Boulder City. Hey, Joe, have you thought about what kind of public outreach you're going to do? I know we do industry review and stuff, but when I was on the review committee for the sewer standards, we did a couple of actual public meetings after sending out drafts. Are you planning on anything like that?
Yes, Jim. Actually, as you know, I was at Water Rec when that was going on, and I am going to mirror a lot of that process because I like the way you guys did that.
I think it worked out pretty well. So.
Yeah, you worked out the issues, and then once you had stuff together, you really, and that's why I said it's going to take probably a good 3 months to get it through everybody once it's all done by public meetings, by all this other stuff, and then go through the proper channels. So yes, we will plan on doing some of those public meetings.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Keene. Are there any other comments? All right, and we don't need any, just verifying that there are no, that we don't need a vote on any other items, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. All right. So we're moving on to item 6. As item 6, I'll turn to you, Joe.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item number 6 is to discuss topics of interest. This is the opportunity for subcommittee members to share updates or information with other members.
All right, thank you. Is there anything that a member of the subcommittee would like to share? I think we're all just thinking about this working group. So, if there are no more comments, we can move on to the next item. Thank you, Mr. Damiani.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Your last item on the agenda is your final citizens participation period.
All right, this is the second time set aside for public comment. Just a reminder that comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining word to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Chair Levitt. David Gloria again for the record. There are no public comments at this time.
All right. Thank you. If there are no additional comments, I'll close the item. If there's nothing else, then this meeting is adjourned.